Well, thank you for joining us for this episode of Look Who's Talking. This is one that I'm very excited about, been looking forward to for a long time. It's someone who I hold a huge amount of respect for. One of the reasons I hold that is because this man is very humble. So when I'm bigging him up, he may well start blushing. But this is a man who is an overachiever in every sense of the word in carp fishing. Looking at his credentials is nothing short of astonishing. So we get to sit down and spend the afternoon with Simon Crowe. So thank you for joining us, Si.
Mate, you sound just like Rob Hughes with all that flannel.
Well, Rob is even more articulate than I would aspire to be. But I know he knows you inside out. You've both been friends for a really long time. And as I was just trying to say, you're one of these guys that are very rare. You've got a lot of great qualities, but one of the things that I do love about you is that you don't go around platforming yourself. You know, I know that you operate in the industry and so on, but you're never chest beating about the incredible fish you've caught or anything like that. And I think that carries a lot of water for me. So Rob will be bigging you up because he knows, like I know, that you don't do it yourself. So there you go.
Well, I could say the same about you, mate, if I'm honest, because you're one of those guys that's got a mega CV as well. And, you know, I don't see you doing that, mate. We're not that generation, I don't think, mate, that goes around doing that. I think it's more the sort of the younger guys now that get drawn into that because that's how, you know, social media seems to be these days, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. Thank you for that. I appreciate that. But it's interesting. Like thank you for my CV is reasonable, but you know, and obviously in preparation for this, I've been having a bit of a deep dive, and mate, you are the best word I could come up with to describe you is you are the ultimate overachiever in carp fishing. I honestly don't believe that anybody can hold a candle to your achievements. So we're going to get into some of the things that you've done, and you've really been hugely instrumental into bringing the sport to where it is now. And I think that when you were talking about the younger guys just then, it's interesting because I've been reading in Carpology recently, Harry Charrington's article. I know Harry's a really good lad, and he was writing about competitive carp fishing and fishing for England and so on. And it struck me that you not only were the first world champion in competitive carp fishing, but you did that probably before any of those England guys were born, which is like, wow.
Yeah.
So
it's 30 years, mate, this year since me and Rob won that. Yeah, 30 years in May 1996. So I'm amazed you can still remember it, mate, because it's a long time ago. It shows how long you've been on the carp fishing scene as well, mate, because, you know, carp fishing has changed massively because what I can remember about that match is in 1996, carp fishing was only about catching big carp. It was only about that. If you didn't catch big carp and you weren't a big carp angler, then you was a noddy. And then that match came on the scene. And at the time, myself and Rob was doing a lot of articles in Carp World, which you used to write for yourself. Our original sort of series was about fishing day ticket waters, going to a lake for 48 hours on a weekend, trying to get a bite from there, which in those days just didn't exist. It was all about targeting monsters from undisclosed venues. You never named the lake. Everything was kept secretive. It was proper hardcore carp fishing. And we came on the scene, started writing about these venues, and got labelled Kiss and Tell twins, a couple of noddies because we was catching doubles from little day ticket waters and stuff like that. But, you know, Nashi saw something in us, and he entered us into that event. And then, you know, we went on and ended up winning it, which was, all I've got is great memories of that event. Great memories. And it helped me massively to get into the trade as well.
Yeah. So that was 96. Obviously, as you just described there, carp fishing was incomprehensibly different for people who are newer to it now. That it was just almost like a different sport or pastime. So that event was that Fisher-Bill, Si?
Yeah, it was. Yeah, Fisher-Bill.
Yeah. Okay. You didn't get a good draw, did you?
No, we came 30th out of the draw. 30th. Right. There was 55 teams in the event. Teams of 2 anglers. There was teams from all over, the world. There was South Africans, Egyptians. I think there's Americans in there as well, you know, French, There was, Belgians, Dutch anglers, German anglers, English anglers as well. And it was a watercraft draw. It wasn't one of these out-the-bag draws. And we came 30th out the draw. So there'd been 30 teams prior to us that had chose their swims. But both myself and Rob was really fortunate in that before the event took place, we'd walked around the lake, done the research, we'd got our favourite swims listed, and one of our favourite swims, there wasn't one favourite swim for us, there was a number of favourite swims. And when we came 30th out the draw, we couldn't believe it that one of our favoured swims was still available. And we ended up selecting it. Then we caught the first fish, the last fish, the most fish, the biggest fish. And basically, I like to say this because it's not just about us. It's English carp fishing at that time was really well advanced. We were doing really well as a nation. We were the forerunners of carp fishing. And since then, obviously, there's been a lot of catch up with a lot of the European guys, a lot of the global carp anglers. There's some amazing carp anglers out there. And there was back in those days. But the point I'm getting at is that the industry in 1996 was predominantly English. So, there was advantages that we had. There was, at the time we was using, I'm sure you remember it, Nash's ball pellet. That was a really famous thing when it came on. It was a soluble boilie as such, and the industry had never seen it. And it came on. It was one of 𝗖𝗿𝗽's ideas, who formed 𝗪𝗏𝘀. And we was also using micromass, which is the original, I think it was 6 mil or 8 mil, tiny little boilies. So completely different things that we were using, which, Nash bait was in its infancy back in those days. And we had an advantage with that, and it was not just knowledge of the lake, getting a good draw. It was also the advantage of, the English nation and carp anglers, carp industry being the forerunners of the sport.
That is fascinating. I remember the micromass. I think it was 6 mil or something. It was very small. And the ball pellets, remember those as well. What did you do in terms of, how you would fish a match now if you were to fish with Rob? Technically would be different. So just go back in time to that match and give us a little a reel off of what your main line was, what your rigs were, how were you getting your bait out there, because it's 30 years, Si.
Yeah. Well, what I do know is I was using exactly the same rig, which is 30 years ago. It's very little has changed with my rig, because other than the types of hooks, the types of hook links and things like that, but the actual rig principle itself was exactly the same as what I'm using now. At the time, we was doing a series in Carp World, which was about day ticket fishing, like I said, and we kind of wanted a rig that we could use at any venue. And we came up with this just simple setup, which was just a simple bottom bait on a hair rig with a little bit of tubing on it and a bit of braid. And back in those days, braided hook links were all the rage, silkworm and multi-strand and things like that from the Kriston guys. And I love Dave's, that's Dave Chilton who owned Kriston. I loved his ideas about hook links and how carp feed and how he designed products that worked for catching carp, the suck and bloat items. And I liked that idea. And we developed a rig which we could take to lots of different venues that helped us with that day ticket series. And we termed it, it's never ever taken off or anything like that, but we termed it the uni rig because you could universally take it anywhere. That's what me and Rob used to call it. And we were both using it at the time. And then the approach was really, we'd fished 𝗪𝗏𝘀 quite a few times before, because you probably remember back in those days, Carp World used to run 𝗪𝗏𝘀 trips, and you could book through Carp World, and then Carp World would organise, or 𝗪𝗏𝘁𝗍𝗍 would organise a group of instructors, and then you'd be assigned like a group of about 5 or 6 guys per person. And we'd been there half a dozen times. We knew it quite well, and it was all about sticking a decent bed of bait at a castable range and then fishing beyond that. The fish generally sort of hung out right in the middle of the lake. And that's all we did. Just fished in one of the most accessible swims to get out to that middle part of the lake, and then just fished over the back of the bait. And it worked on every trip that we went out there, and it worked during that match as well. So, that's really the tactics that we was using. Really simple stuff.
So, what sort of range were you talking about, Si?
Well, what I can remember about it is we had a really strong headwind blowing into our area. We was in a swim that's called Peg 17, and it's on the north bank of the lake. and it gives you good access straight out in front, right towards the middle part of the lake. There was a good strong wind blowing into us. Back in those days, both myself and Rob would probably, well, Rob wouldn't admit it because he's very, no way, I'm going to admit it. Neither of us was very long range casters. It was probably 120, 130, 140 yards, something like that maximum. And then we was fishing a bed of bait, which was just sticking out at about 100 yards. And I can't even remember if we used a spom or a spod, as it would have been back in those days. I can't remember. It was mostly sticking out the ball pellet and then fishing. Oh, we will have done used a spod actually, because we did use the micromass as well, so we would have done. But it was mostly with the ball pellet, getting the ball pellet out as far as we possibly could, and then really feeding the fish with the smell, the pellets, and not overfeeding them too much with boilies, because obviously when you get 55 teams of 2 anglers fishing a lake, there's going to be loads of bait going in there, and the fish ain't going to start mopping that bait up. Even at somewhere like 𝗪𝗍, they were going to start thinking, what the hell is going on here? There's loads of lines everywhere. There's loads of bait everywhere. So we kind of just put an attraction out there and then just fished as far out towards the middle as we could get.
Brilliant. I absolutely love that the first ever world champion or pair of world champions won the event using watercraft, proper old fashioned British watercraft. So
we went around the whole lake, mate, with a little map, and what I can remember about it is we gave them either a number 1, which was like a poor choice of swim, a 2, 3, working up to a 4. If it was a 4, it was one of our top choices, and peg 17 was one of our top choices, and it was a great swim. It was known for being a great swim during the Carp World events, and we couldn't believe that it was available.
Yeah, fantastic. Did you? Obviously, massive success there in the first event. Did you then carry on doing competitive carp fishing for the years after that?
We did a little bit of it. Both of us did, because we kind of, when you're younger, you've got a bit of an ego about yourself. And I come from a sporting background, and you're a little bit competitive. I'm completely the opposite nowadays, unless it's something to do with running. But with fishing, I've been outfished that many times by grannies, aunts, uncles who've just started fishing, that I've got no ego with it whatsoever. And there's very little you can do about being in the right swim at the right time. That's just part of what fishing is. But back in those days, I'm probably right in saying that Rob will have had a little bit of an ego as well. And we were quite competitive as anglers. We didn't fish as much as we do nowadays. We always wanted to be the top rods on the lake, as you are when you're younger. And, the competitive side of fishing was something that we kind of enjoyed. And off the back of winning that event, Rob obviously started the BCAC. Only a couple of years later, he started competitive carp fishing in England, which was the British Carp Angling Championships. And at the time, Rob was a lawyer going through, law school, working for a company. And I was working at Carp Talk back in those days. I'd finished university, started at Carp Talk, and part of the time I was on the bank, part of the time I was in the office talking about fishing. So I was surrounded by fishing. And every time I spoke to Rob, he was just listening to the same old busker outside his office window, playing the same tunes every day in Wolverhampton Town Centre, acting as a lawyer. And in the end, he decided I'm going to try and find a niche where I can get myself into carp fishing as a full-time occupation. So he started the British Carp Angling Championships off the back of that event. And then the rest is history.
Wow. So that win really was so seminal, wasn't it, in terms of spawning the huge, competitive carp fishing around Europe and the world now is a thing. But it all came from that event, because if you guys hadn't won that, then who knows what would have happened. Obviously, the BCACs went on to become a really big deal. And there's matches going on all the time. There's one on a lake near me today, where they've hired it out exclusively for a match. So that's amazing. From May '96, 30 almost to the year, or to the month even, 30 years ago. Fantastic.
Do you know what I also remember about that event, mate, which makes me smile? And I think I'm right in saying this. This is, your memory changes as you get older. And when we got back from winning it, obviously I was working for Carp World magazine at the time, which is Tim's group. There was Big Carp, which was Rob Mayling's magazine. And I always remember Rob Mayling writing an editorial slagging us off for winning it, saying, you're not world champions. How can you call yourself world champions and all this sort of stuff? Really laid into us as a couple of young lads. And then at the time, Pete Springate had just caught the Mary and Mary's mate brace, and he turned around in his editorial and said, "You're not the world champions. Pete Springate's the world champion. Arise, Sir Pete." And that's to me, right, I'm quite proud of this, because that's what started Pete Springate being called Sir Pete, was from that editorial. So that's where it kind of started. It's kind of, whenever I see somebody referencing Pete Springate, I always remember that editorial that Rob wrote about it. So it makes me smile.
That is fantastic. Yeah.
And Pete is a sir. Pete been around carp fishing a lot longer than I have. He's a proper sir. He's been a pioneer for years and stuff like that. So I'm kind of quite proud of the fact that I think I may have influenced Pete becoming a sir.
Knighted by proxy. Brilliant. I like that. That's fantastic. You just got back from Texas side. What was good? You weren't on Joe Rogan, were you? What were you out there for?
Big Carp Tackle. Got their jumper on. I like it just because I like it. I've known the guys that run Big Carp Tackle over in America for probably 30 years. I've known Dave. Dave, who runs it for 30 years, Dave Moore. And he's been on the scene for years, mate. He comes to most of the shows, and he imports English carp tackle into America. And you know what it's like when you go to the shows, Pen, is you see somebody you haven't seen for ages. Oh yeah, we'll sort out a session, I'll join you, and all this kind of stuff. And in January, I went to the 𝗪𝗏 show over in Holland, and I saw Dave again, as I always do, and we went through the same conversation of I'll get out there, and then basically I got home the day later, and my youngest stepson's absolutely massively into Texas and America and stuff like that. He's, I just love to be out there. And I spoke to Dave, said I'm going to go out there. And then as I was coming home, I went, you know what? Let's go to Texas. Let's book a trip. Always, for my fishing in England, it always tends to kick off about mid-March onwards. So I said to Dave, what about 2 weeks in early March? Does that work for you? He said, yes, great. So as soon as I got back from 𝗪𝗏, booked it. I had 5 weeks to plan it, and then we were going. And I absolutely loved it. And so did Sam. That's my youngest stepson. He's not even a carp angler, Sam isn't. But I told him, right, we've got to make a couple of films when we're over there, a couple of fishing films, do a bit of work, then we'll just do some touring and enjoy it. And, he absolutely loved it, just like I did.
What a great experience. Fantastic. So there's some films coming out of that. Will they be on your channel?
They'll probably be on the Avid channel, mate. They will, because I have to produce a few films for Avid, and I've not started editing them yet. They'll probably be out sometime in the next month, 2 months, something like that. Could be into the summer. Definitely one film, possibly two. Depends on when I sit down and sort out all the footage and start, putting it into a film format.
Right. Brilliant. Well, I look forward to seeing that, mate. I just wanted to, when I look at your sort of background and achievements, a lot of people won't know that you've got a Master of Science degree in fisheries as well. So you're qualified on an ecological/biological level to look at carp fishing, which I guess must play a role to some extent in how successful you are as an angler, or is it?
Yeah, I went down that route because of my interest in fishing, and you're the same sort of age as me. You know what it was like when you was at school. There was no, I'm a mature student. There was no sort of avenue for going into academically topics that you enjoyed. You was given maths, English, PE, and that was it. There was no other choices. But obviously, as I got older, it was in my early 20s. I went to university. And when I went to university, it was the option to do fisheries. And I was like, wow, I want to get into that. I want to understand carp. I want to understand fisheries. I want to understand everything I possibly can about this subject that I absolutely love. And was fortunate I did my degree in countryside management, sort of business and leisure studies, countryside management. So there was no options really to go into fisheries. But the year later, I think it was when 𝗪𝗏 started. And there was also a course that started in Hull, which is where I was living at the time, up north. It was at Hull Institute of Fisheries Management, and it was called Fisheries Management. And I went down that avenue, and I ended up getting thanks to winning that World Carp Cup in 1996, I got a scholarship for doing it. So I didn't have to pay to go to university or anything. I'm fortunate that I've got no no debt from going to university. It was all paid for through this scholarship. They gave one scholarship away a year, and I was chosen as the student to get it because I just won this World Carp Cup. So if they say that carp matches don't mean anything, well, they do to me.
Absolutely. Yeah, I love that. That's brilliant. Well, I mean, that you're sort of, well, it's very apparent that when you choose something to focus on, you are very full on for it. And I know that that's led you to success with Really Big Fish. We want to talk a little bit about your marathon running as well, because I don't think there's no one I know in carp fishing, known or unknown, who's fascinated with marathon running as you are. So I want to get into that.
I used to be. I've kind of lost I lost interest in it, mate, because of my wife hasn't. But when COVID started, we'd paid for a load of events to actually take part in, and I lost so much money on it. I was like, I've had enough of this bullshit, And I as Rob calls me, a bit of a tight arse and stuff like that. And I ended up sort of falling out of love with entering events. My wife still does it now. I still run, but I'm not into the sort of the.
I mean, you've got a really good 3-hour 15 piece personal best, which is not to be sniffed at. And
3:14 it is, maybe my PB. At 49, I ran that at 49 as well. So I wasn't a young spring chicken. I know. If I'd have done this and I'd done that, if I'd have done a marathon when in my 20s, I'd have been sub 3 hours. There's no doubt in my mind I would have. Yeah. And I'm not a marathon runner. When you see in some of the events that I've taken part in, you see 70-year-old blokes running past you who can do sub 3 hours. 70-year-old men running sub 3 hours. It's incredible, mate. That's to get into the parachute regiment, you have to run like 1.5 miles in 9 minutes. Well, them 70-year-olds are running that for 26 miles. So that tells you how special those guys are. And, running a marathon is a science, just like carp fishing is. And I went through a phase of really enjoying it. And I've got some great memories of entering marathons. But these days, it's a lot of training, mate. It's a lot of training. I still run, still keep fit, but I haven't entered any events since COVID.
So you did one in New York. You've done them in Berlin. What was your most memorable one? Was it when you got your 3:14, or is there a particular marathon that maybe because you had to really double grit to get through it, or?
No, I've not really, mate. The marathon running started through my wife more than anything. She's into sport and fitness, same as I am. When we met, neither of us had done a marathon, and we both wanted to. And like you can in a lot of things nowadays, you can go on painting holidays, you can go on knitting holidays, you can go on marathon running holidays. And neither of us had been to. Well, I'd been to New York before, but Lucy'd never been to New York. And the first kind of big event that we entered was New York Marathon in 2016, and we went over there just to look around New York and eventually go and do the marathon. And it was just amazing. Absolutely amazing. If anybody ever wants to do something special with their partner, if they're into running, then enter something like New York Marathon. It's expensive, but it's a life-changing experience. It's absolutely amazing. The whole city of New York shuts down for the marathon. You run through 5 boroughs. You see en route hundreds of bands playing live. So when you're running through somewhere like Queens, you're getting a bit more upmarket music. Then you run through the Bronx, you're getting all the rappers and stuff like that. It's absolutely amazing. And some of my most favourite memories of my life are doing those kind of events with my wife. We've done Chicago, we've done Berlin, we've done New York twice. My wife's done London a few times as well. So, we've done quite a few of them.
Right. That's incredible. To be able to do that with someone you love, like a partner, is extra special as well. Definitely.
Yeah, it is, mate.
You train together, and you obviously help push each other forward when you're doing something like that as well. Did you say Lucy still does marathons?
She does lots of things, mate. She's a lot fitter than me. My wife is. She's a lot better than me. Wow. She won Wakefield Marathon as a female, the female category, in 2017, 2018. I can't remember, but she's done quite well in a lot of the sort of the lower amateur marathons, not the the major ones where there's international athletes. She's not an international athlete or an Olympic athlete or anything like that. She's just a decent club running type athlete, and
Right.
she really enjoys it. She's out running she probably runs 6 days a week, whereas I used to. Nowadays, one week I'll go through the phase of running 6 days a week, and then the next week I won't run at all because just motivation as it starts to creep in as you get older.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. So you're again one of very few anglers in the public eye who's never put on, in my view, not even an ounce. So you obviously still work. you obviously you're either genetically blessed or you do apply a level of fitness discipline to your life right up to this very moment. I mean, diet, fitness, how important is it to you right now, Si?
You mentioned earlier on about me getting really into, when I've got something in my mind and I keep going through with it. I ain't ever been tested or anything like that, but I can almost guarantee, my wife says it all the time, I've probably got one of these. I'm on the spectrum somewhere with regards to my attention levels and my attention deficit and things like that. I don't have any attention for things I'm not interested in. So when I was at school, it used to just go and I would be messing around and, one of those disruptive kind of kids at school. Whereas if I'm interested in something, I will focus 1,000,000% into it. So if I want to target a carp, I know literally every single thing about that fish, and it stays in my brain. And even to this day, when I'm watching the TV, if I watch the film, when I'm not interested in it, you can ask me what happened in that film. No idea. I've not absorbed that information at all. So I will be somewhere on the spectrum, mate, with regards to ADHD or autism or something like that, because I have very limited interest in anything. And if I'm interested in it, I'll know everything about it. If I'm not interested in it, like Rob uses an example, he is a sponge. He absorbs information. He's a really well-read person. Same as Frank Warwick. You could ask Frank, and I think yourself as well. You're a really well-read guy, and I could ask you a general knowledge type of question, and you would do absolutely amazing at it because you know quite a lot about a broad number of subjects. Same as Frank does, same as Rob does. But me, if I was on Mastermind, I'd be no good on the general knowledge, but I'd be good on the specialist subject.
Well, I think that element of being on the spectrum is a lot of people, certainly a lot of successful carp anglers are, and successful business people as well. And I think that kind of, what's the right word for it? I suppose condition or whatever is a curse if you're a child. Certainly in the modern age, that they're having trouble at school and they're being separated and so on and so forth. But I think actually it's probably, I would see it as a cognitive attribute to be able to focus right in, tunnel vision on a particular thing and know it inside out is probably more of an asset than knowing lots of things a bit. So yeah, I think probably being on the spectrum as an adult is probably not a bad thing. So it's certainly not held you back, has it?
Apart from at Christmas on Trivial Pursuits.
Yeah.
all I ever choose is the orange ones, which to do with sport. Everything else I've got no idea about. I go around from orange one to orange one.
Oh, true. I love a bit of Trivial Pursuit. Let's go back to Carp Talk. Now, I had a huge affection for Carp Talk. It was Carp Talk that was responsible for me getting my first industry job. I never intended to work in the industry, never had any aspirations to, but I was down the lake one day and there was a box ad in Carp Talk. We were reading it on a Friday night with a can of beer on the summer sunshine, and I saw this, and my best mates were either side of me, and I thought, I hope they haven't clocked it, and I removed the page and put it in my pocket because I didn't want them to compete with me. So I thought this is a dream job, and it was a job for packing boxes for a tackle dealer, but it didn't say who it was. It was a warehouse job and it was a PO box. And anyway, without going into all that, it turned out it was a job at Drennan. So through Carp Talk, I ended up getting into the industry. But I had a huge affection from the very first issue of Carp Talk. It was it was a big deal. We looked forward to it coming out every week so we could see, because as you stated earlier, 𝗖, you were saying about how it was very a big fish dominated era and people had targets and we were chasing fish and so on. And that really was the Bible of what you were going to target next. What were you going to cut out? What were you going to put in your wallet and carry around with you? And, and the influence that it had on us. And I know obviously you worked your way through the ranks to eventually become editor. So can you encapsulate, like, what year did you start at Carp Talk?
I was in issue 1. I started writing in Carp Talk from issue 1 right the way through to the last issue. And the only mags that I wasn't in was when I was on holiday. So, but most issues I'd have contributed in one way or another to it in some way. There was a few at the beginning that, I was in probably the first 50 issues, and then it started being, well, I'm having a week off next week. And I kind of started as an office boy because, again, it goes back to when I was at university in 1996, and Carp Talk's based in Hull. I went to do my master's degree at Hull Institute of Fisheries Management, and a passing comment to 𝗪𝗿𝗄𝘀 when we was chatting one day, I'm going to Hull Uni. Oh, right, if you need a bit of work, then, we'll get you in the Carp Talk office to do a bit of work there. So I started 1 day a week in the office about a year into the mag's life. But I'd been writing in the mag since issue 1. I was in issue 1 right the way through, and I started on 1 day a week. And then it was pretty clear, I think, to the guys, 𝗪𝗿𝗄𝘀, Kev Clifford and Chris Ball, that there was myself and Paddy Webb working on the mag. With the greatest respect to Paddy, he wasn't interested in carp fishing. Certainly not like I am. I'm completely engrossed in it, and even to this day. And they knew that I was interested in it. They knew I had a passion for it. And that's where it sort of started progressing towards working as the editor. Before I was the editor of Carp Talk, I was the editor of Carp World Mag. I was the editor of Crafty Carper Mag. And then there was a time when I was put in this position by Tim Paisley, who's been massively influential on my fishing career. And he said, "See, the editor of Carp World or editor of Carp Talk, choose one." And as much as I loved the monthly magazines at that time were a little bit, how can I say? They weren't boring. That's not the word I'm looking for. They were very much the same, very much similar sort of people, similar sort of contributors, similar sort of articles. Whereas working with the news of Carp Talk, every week was different because every cover was different. Every article that was in the magazine, every news story was different. There were so many things happening in carp fishing at the time that Carp Talk had more of an interest to me. And the news side of it was really just, I can't tell you what Carp Talk news desk was like in the mid-90s, because it was just amazing, because you were at the hub of carp fishing. You knew who was catching from the most secretive waters. You knew who'd caught something and you weren't supposed to know. You knew everything. People was ringing you all the time and they was telling you everything, and you got so much information, and it was just an awesome place to be. Whereas, carp fishing nowadays, unless you're friends with them on Facebook, or unless you've got them in your list or whatever, you might not know what they're catching or what they're up to and stuff. So it's a completely different world. And Carp Talk in the 90s was just an awesome place, an absolutely awesome place. I was with the mag from, as I say, from issue 1 right the way through to the end. And I've got so many great memories of working there, having conversations with so many different people from around the carp fishing world, from the most secretive of angler right the way through to the most, out there and most obvious people. And it was just awesome, mate. Awesome time at Carp Talk. I've got great memories of working there.
I love that. I absolutely love that. And I can get a sense of the vibe of the excitement that, when you're at that desk and the phones are ringing and the faxes are coming through. It was fax then when patch reports were sent through, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Do
you know what I remember most about it, mate, as well is, well, I've got so many things that I remember most about it, but let's talk about somebody who we've both got a massive amount of respect for, and that's 𝗪𝗪𝗪𝘀, because carp fishing, when I first came on the scene in the late 80s, sort of mid 80s, it was about, if you'd been around carp fishing a long time, then you spoke with credibility. If the older you were, the better the angler you were, the more kudos you had. And then then this young lad came on the scene who completely dispelled all of those kind of things, which was, he was a young kid. He was new to carp fishing, and he was banging out all the big uns. He was catching all the big uns. And when he caught Mary, I was on the news desk. You can go back into Carp Talk and see, and I'm proud of it, the story written by Simon Crowe and things like that. And Terry caught the biggest carp in England, and all of the old blokes that was out there couldn't turn around and say, the young kids know nothing. They're no good. And I hated that arrogant side of carp fishing at the time. It was a very secretive industry, very secretive, and the older you were, they all spoke to one another, but because you was a young kid, they wouldn't speak to you. They weren't interested in telling you anything. And my carp fishing life, I found quite difficult around where I lived, because no one would tell me anything, because I was a young kid and I had a passion for it, and I was surrounded by old blokes, and older guys sort of looked at young guys in a strange way. But when Terry just blitzed all of those big fish, it was an awesome time.
Yeah, it was an awesome time. And I'm just, one of the many things that continues to impress me about Terry is that when we got him to come and sign for 𝗔𝗰𝗱𝗀𝗀𝗃 in about 97, which was a year after he caught Mary, wasn't it? And when I went down to meet him in 𝗖𝗿𝗽 Angling Centre, and then bring him up to the office to have a cup of tea with Peter and myself, he was he's naturally quite introverted and shy, and to have seen that sort of part of his personality, which he still is, I think, a lot of, to a lesser extent today, but he's overcome that to become one of the best speakers and one of the best representatives that we have. And I always think of that shy young man in tortoiseshell optics in the corner of 𝗖𝗿𝗽 Angling Centre, who was nervous about coming up to 𝗔𝗰𝗱, and think about who he is today. And I think, you've done yourself proud, mate. You've done the sport proud, and you continue to be a great ambassador. You've overcome that shyness, even though you're not comfortable. And you would think he was the best orator since Barack Obama or something.
Yeah. Fascinating, mate. I listen to all of his films, watch them all. When he does a talk on stage, you just listen to him, because his enthusiasm is just amazing. Yeah. It's infectious, and fair play. The industry needs someone like Terry, and at that time, when he was making, news at Carp Talk, it was a great time.
Yeah, just I can't not, now you've said infectious enthusiasm, I can't not mention who I thought was the epitome of that, who's now sadly no longer with us. But every time I saw Chris Ball, even though he'd been doing it for so long, his enthusiasm was monumental, just off the scale. Oh my God.
When he passed away, mate, because I worked with Bally every day at Carp Talk. When he passed away, I had to turn around and say something about it, because no matter what the day, he went towards his latter years of his life, he went through a lot of health issues, Chris did. No matter what day you rang him up, it was always, "Hello, Simon, how you doing?" He was just so enthusiastic, so friendly. There was no negativity. It was all just wonderful vibes from him. And I've got so many memories of him ringing up Carp. "Guess what's happened?" What boy? You know, and you're like thinking someone's been killed or someone's happened, and then you find out that the scales have been calibrated the way that, and he was just such an enthusiastic guy. And we was like, so many times he'd ring up and this amazing news, and is that all? But he's the ultimate hype merchant. And when I used to be on the stand at Carp Talk with him as a kid growing up, and he got his special album out and things like that, he started with one person coming up, 2 people, 3 people. Next minute, he got an audience. And once Chris had got an audience, there was no stopping him. He absolutely thrived. He was just awesome bloke.
I think of him so fondly, especially when, sometimes you meet people whose life maybe seems to revolve around carp fishing, and you talk to them about it, and there doesn't seem to be any passion there. And I just always think of Chris Ball, passion and enthusiasm just off the scale. God bless him. What guy.
I think a lot of that generation were like that, though, mate. A lot of the guys before us, you know, Rod, Kev Clifford, Tim Pate. Tim's an amazing bloke, mate. Tim is, and you know, there's a lot of that generation that their passion has created the carp fishing industry that we've got now. You know, you wouldn't ever have, you know, the likes of Carp Talk, Carp World, all those kind of mags without Tim and his passion for making carp fishing into what it is today. And you know, they all need a proper doff of the cap, you know, because they've been amazing. That's why we're here today talking about carp fishing, because of what all those blokes did, the generation before us lot.
100%. I mean, just in terms of literature, the magazines and the literary offshoots that Tim's been responsible for. I mean, you yourself, you've written 5 books and have been editor of 3 magazines under Tim, you know, so he's creatively, in terms of literature's terms, he's sort of turned you into what you've become in that way, hasn't he? But
massively, mate.
He's done as well, his own books. I mean, the contribution is off the scale size, isn't it?
See, I remember going to Cashin about 25 years ago with Tim, and he said he's never going to write another book. That's it, it's finished. And then 12 months later, there's another book, and then there's another book, and then there's another book. And then he's writing somebody else's memoirs. And he turned round, Frank will remember this because he was in the car at the time, and Tim turned round and said he didn't class himself as a successful carp angling writer. He classed himself as a failed author, because he loves words, he loves writing and stuff like that. And we was like, what, Tim? You are not a failure at all. You are an incredible man, you know. And his use of words, his writing skills, his passion. He's an incredible writer, an incredible journalist, and you know, nobody, I don't think, can, certainly of the people that I know from, you know, they're still around carp fishing, nobody's contribution to carp fishing has been as big as Tim's. Even Cliff Foxes, Nashes, people like that, they've all contributed in many, many ways, but Tim's contribution to create what we've got today is just incredible.
I couldn't agree more. And even more remarkably, he's still out there doing it, isn't he? How old is he this year?
He's 89 this year. And he still goes to Rainbow, Penners. Still goes to Rainbow. And anybody that's ever fished Rainbow knows how, when you get a bleep at Rainbow, you've got to be on it. Do you know what I mean? And then it's all action out in the boat. You know, it's an amazing, electrifying, exciting, energetic venue to fish. And the fitter you are, the more healthy you are, the more easier it is, even though nothing about Rainbow is easy. And at 89 years old, I mean, Tim's still exercising, he's still dieting, he's still up there. I have conversations with him regularly on the phone, and his memory is better than mine. He might not be physically the same as he was 20, 30 years ago, but his memory is incredible.
I love that. Brilliant. I thought you were going to say 86, 89 is just even more remarkable.
Yeah.
So just keeping it with Carp Talk, when you were running that site, was it hard dealing with chancers? Because you must have had chancers, like people, because anglers have always been, like, historically the people who would like fiddle with the truth in a little way. How did you deal with that? And have you got any memories that you can share?
Loads of them, mate. Absolutely loads of them. Remember a guy sending in a catch report holding a dead fish, which was clearly dead. And you can go back in the magazines and have a look, because we always used to speak to him on the phone. Paddy, especially Paddy Webb, who I only saw quite recently. I did a little interview with him on my YouTube channel quite recently, and we was talking about it. Paddy used to love picking the phone up and calling somebody a liar. he just used to love doing it. He'd call anybody out. And he was so blunt and direct and things like that, Paddy was. And he used to often fall out with people because of the way he was. But this guy sent this fish in. He got like a towel on his lap, and he got this dead fish. You know, it was completely rock solid. The fins was all rotted, and he's holding it and he's trying to claim that it was I can't remember the weight of it, and he's trying to claim that he caught it, and it was clearly dead. You know, that's one of the most standout ones. There was so many of them, mate, where we had people that claimed that they caught a Thames carp. I can remember one guy claiming he caught a carp from the Thames, and he went on his Facebook page and it was from Dream Lakes, and you know, people falling foul of things like that. People used to enter competitions with when in the early days of Photoshop, where they'd photoshopped a carp over the top of themselves, you know, pretending they were holding a fish, and then superimpose it over the top. They'd claim prizes to do with that. There was lots of different things, and there was always these guys, when they got found out, they'd always come screaming hell at us. You've put that in my catch report saying I caught it on Nash bait when you know I've caught it on mainline, blah, 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 when they were getting called out for claiming prizes off different bait companies or whatever, and then bring the catch report out, and there it was, exactly what he said it was, and he's trying to make out that we were the liars and stuff like that. There was so many people who tried to get away with things, mate, but...
Did that get worse, Si, because... certainly there was a period of time, I can't remember what years it would have been, you'll know, when you were running Carp Angler of the Year competition, was like 10 grand up for grabs. Yeah. So did you see like a peak then in people trying to chance it?
Not really, mate. They've ever since issue 1, I think we've had chances. That's like you've just said before about carp fishing. It's one of those industries, carp fishing is, where you can say very easily, well, I don't publicise my catches, but, you know, a lot of people are talking about the fact that I've had 3 different UK 50s from nature reserves, which are no publicity. Ooh, and it starts the ripples going. And you can say that, but you can't turn around and say, I once put 3 past Liverpool in the cup playing for Man United. Do you know what I mean? But you can say stuff like that in carp fishing and get away with it, and straight away you become this hardcore underground carp angler and start getting respect from the guys for being a no publicity merchant and things like that. You can say that, and so over the years we've just had it every year. There was so many of them, mate. We had lots of different reasons behind why they was caught out. Blaming their ex-wife for sending in a false catch report for them, right the way through to it's not them on the catch report, it's another Simon Crow or whatever, you know, it's just another name and all this kind of stuff, mate. So we had excuses galore, but most of the time it was just carp anglers being, it was this big, you know, that sort of, you know, the stories that we've all heard over the years.
So you had to wade through a huge amount of reports because you were the own. I mean, obviously there was Angling Times and Anglers Mail, but ostensibly all the carp fishing news went to the whole hub, as I call it. But so you had to wade through that. You had to disseminate truth from fiction. You had to decide what you were going to publish. You had to come up with nice bits of alliteration for your headlines, which you always had. Always alliteration. And you still had to do that within a very, very tight time frame. And I think I'm right in saying you never missed a deadline, did you?
No, I never missed a deadline, mate. Never missed one. And generally speaking, mate, it was about 3.5 days. It wasn't a full week because the printers, especially, it had to go off to the printers at a certain time. And obviously, when you've got staff on holiday and things like that, it was a small group of people working there. It was very passionate people working there, and it was thanks to the way that Kev Clifford used to run it. It was flexi time, because when you're working on the news, you have to be willing to act quickly. Back in those days, somebody had to either contact somebody straight away or go and get a photograph developed, because obviously a lot of Carp Talk years was pre-digital, so it was all about sending the camera off to the developers, getting the photographs back, developing them, all that kind of stuff. So there was so many time constraints against us, and to do a magazine for 24 years on a weekly deadline. I've started doing like not always weekly videos, but regular videos on one of my YouTube channels, and I tell you what, mate, it's so hard. It's so hard, and you sit there thinking, how did we used to do Carp Talk every week? But there was a group of people who worked on it. It wasn't just one person. There was a group of guys ranging from, you know, Chris working down south, Chris Ball down south, Tim working up north, Kevin Clifford doing all the reproduction, me working on the news desk, Paddy working on all the catch reports and news desk, sorting the features out, 3 or 4 guys behind the scenes who used to look after the reproduction of the magazine and putting it out, and, you know, getting the advertising sorted and things like that. It was a team effort over those 24 years. So not one person is responsible for Carp Talk. Tim's idea originally, which was then born through Tim, Kev and Chris, Kev Clifford and Chris Ball, making it turning it into a magazine, and then getting the right members of staff in place to make it work. And one of the things I think everybody who worked at Carp Talk is pretty proud about is not many of the staff left after only a year or so. Most of the people who was behind Carp Talk have been there for many years, and you know, it was a tight group of people who just knew how to do it, and we did it every week.
I think when you look back now, Si, at the two different paths you could have taken, the one that you decided to take, editorial helmship of Carp Talk, was the one. It's given you such a rich memory and experience, hasn't it? I mean, doing Carp World obviously would have been mega, but it was a unique time, wasn't it? A unique experience.
Yeah. Oh, massively, mate, because you when you got a picture sent in before it even went into Carp Talk, you saw the information, you saw the catch before it went out there publicly. Okay, the guy who'd caught it might have told his 3 of his friends, but it had not gone out there. So once you knew about it, you could make inquiries, you could get on, you know, on the grapevine and start finding out a little bit of information about it and see whether it was worth targeting it or getting, you know, making avenues into getting a ticket for there and things like that. And it was a great time for being, like I say, at the hub of carp fishing, right at the central hub of carp fishing. You know, these days, a lot of the central hub of carp fishing is held by the companies like 𝗪𝗪, you know, a huge company, so successful. The amount of information that they've got coming into them from different anglers who are sponsored in their team or want to be members of their team and things like that, and they can put them in touch with people who run this lake, and they can give them a bit of gear in return for getting access to a lake and things like that. The companies now have got a lot of the power, not the power, but the central hub. And in the days, it used to be the news desk, Angling Times. Imagine being on the news desk at Angling Times. You know, imagine being Kev Green. We're dealing with all of those record fish that Kev dealt with an Angling Times news desk in the 90s. And, you know, I was just involved with the carp side at Carp Talk, and it was awesome, mate. Absolutely awesome.
What a time to be alive, Si. I love that. It's the impact of the Echo and the Keep It Real movement was something that came about not long after that, sort of around about 2000, I'm guessing. So that, I remember looking through Carp Talk avidly every week, as I did, and it was very apparent that the editorial leadership, which I guess this comes back to you, but we always knew there was someone behind the scenes who would take a fish from a slightly more dubious background and put it on page 17, whereas a fish from maybe Raspberry 1 would go on page 2 or 3. And was that a process that you engendered and engineered, and something that you had to fight against, maybe with other people within the building? Or can you tell us a bit about that, Simon?
Obviously, the magazine was owned by Tim Paisley, Kev Clifford, and Chris Ball, who ultimately their knowledge of carp fishing and how it worked was passed down to the other members of staff, and how they wanted the magazine to be run. And very much the carp fishing side of things, the Keep It Real movement, everyone at Carp Talk was probably pro Keep It Real. However, the carp fishing industry is completely different to the Keep It Real sort of movement. And that is that when we was getting catch reports sent in by a little 17-year-old kid from Darrenth who'd just gone and caught the Salagoo Common, who knew nothing about the Salagoo Common, and he got a catch report that said, I can't believe I've caught this fish. It's absolutely amazed me. It was such a hard fight. That lad's passion is in that fish. Discredit that capture because of where the fish came from or the origins and things like that was always a difficult thing to do in the magazine, because you don't want to damage a young lad's interest in fishing, what he's achieved and things like that. But at the same time, you had to uphold a certain level of credibility within the industry as well. And we was, in those days, tied by a lot of libel laws. It had already been taken to court once or twice. Kev Cliff could tell you more about this, but the magazine had been sued a couple of times by people who'd very obviously imported foreign fish into their fisheries. And we'd written the wrong thing about those carp, how they'd suddenly appeared, and they were willing to take action against the magazine. You know, in the late 80s, early 90s, there was a really famous case that involved Kevin Maddox and Angling Times or Anglers Mail. I can't remember which magazine it was, and it cost one of the magazines an awful lot of money, and that set the benchmark for what magazines within the fishing industry could print and could not print. So even though we knew something was a wrong one, we couldn't write it. We had to be careful how we presented it. One of the most famous front covers that we wrote was, "Look what's been caught from Ringstead." And we put on the cover a 50-pound leather carp that was a carp that had just suddenly appeared. And it was the only way to make that fish obvious to the fishing industry. Look what's been caught from Ringstead, a 50-pound leather. And, you know, it could be seen by the Keep It Real crowd that we are pro that kind of fish because we've put it on the cover, but at the same time, we are announcing to the public, look what has just been caught from Ringstead at the same time. So we found ourselves at Carp Talk in a very difficult position because we was often upsetting both sides of that argument by putting pictures on page 1, page 50 or whatever, because you're always going to get people upset that their fish is not the first fish on the cover or it's right at the front of the news. We did give priority more to raspberry fish and, you know, the homegrown fish like heather and basil and things like that, because they were such special carp. They were held in such high esteem. But on occasions, if the photographs weren't very good, they would have ended up, because of reproduction, and when you're producing a magazine, they would only ended up with like a postage stamp photograph because the photograph wasn't very big. And so it was always very difficult for us to make certain fish stand out more than others if the reproduction side of things wasn't very good. But on the whole, generally speaking, should we call them just the history fish? They were always the priorities, and they are to this day now, mate. They always will be. I'm a carp angler that's fishing. I fished everywhere. I fished for wrong uns. I fished for brand new carp. I fished for carp that's been 50 years old, 60 years old. I'm a carp angler and I just enjoy going fishing. I've got fish that I prefer to catch. There's fish that I hold in more high esteem than others, but I'm just a carp angler who just enjoys fishing. We're at that stage of it nowadays where I don't care. Whereas back in 20, 30, 40 years ago, if you went and fished for wrong uns, then you were deemed to be, you know, one of the dark side of things. But when I was dealing with the news desk as an example, I looked up to a lot of, because I was a young kid in my 20s, I looked up to people like, you know, Kevin Maddox, Rod Hutchinson, Alan Taylor, Rob Mayling, Tim Paisley, all these guys. I looked up to them all. And I remember once at the time when Acton Burnell, as an example, was looked at as being a dark side fishery. I remember ringing up Alan Taylor when he caught a couple of 50-pounders from there. And Alan was a lovely bloke, absolutely lovely guy to deal with and talk to. And he turned around to me and he said, because I asked him, I said, why are you fishing at Acton? Because all you could hear was negativity about somewhere like Acton. And he went, Crowie, if you could see what I'm looking at now, this is an amazing place. It's not about just the carp. It's about fishing and just enjoying fishing for what it is. And then I went to Acton Burnell and it was just an incredible place. And those words from Alan struck a chord with the 20-year-old Simon Crowe, the 24, 20, however old I was, in that it's not about size. It's not about being the best. It's about what you get from your fishing experience. Alan had caught carp from history carp going back many years. He'd been around the scene for many years, but he just wanted to go fishing at special places. And I kind of then realised that carp fishing it's about you. It's about what you get out of it. It's not about being the best, or it's not about trying to be the best or trying to catch the best carp. It's just about you enjoying it for your own personal reasons.
There's a lot of wisdom there, Si. And there's several spin-offs from the things you were just saying that I want to get into in a minute. But and you may not, again, like we've got an open format here. If there's anything that you don't want to or can't discuss, then that's absolutely fine. But I just wanted to ask you about when you were at Carp Talk. Now, I remember there was an instance, because I spoke to you on the phone about it, because I called to see if you was okay. where I think you had highlighted that a fish had been moved and you could prove that the fish was identifiable from one place to another, and it led to a bit of a fracas. Can you go into?
Yeah,
because I think
it did, mate. Yeah. Say again, dude.
Because I thought that was an incredible story. What happened?
Yeah, we'd had these pictures of fish sent in from, I think it was the Lincolnshire area, and they were in a 1 acre pit. And once they went into the news, as is always the case, people identify carp. Where's that come from? What's that carp all about? Stuff like that. We started getting phone calls from a guy I think he was on the Isle of Wight, and he'd caught this 50-pound common that was now in a Lincolnshire pit, a 1 acre pit. He'd caught it from a lake in France. He identified it, sent us the photographs. It was very obviously the same fish to anybody that had a trained eye. And we put something on, I think it was our Facebook page at the time. It was in the early days of when Facebook was all starting. You know, we think this is the same fish. What do you guys think? And then it just ended up going, you know, like everybody was commenting on it and giving their 10 penneth. And then the guy who owned the lake brought a group of 8 or 9 people down to the office and ended up causing a bit of a fracas in the office, of which I got the most of it because I was the editor of the magazine. And, you know, thankfully I calmed it all down and they all went their own way. But it was a situation where a fish from overseas had been identified in England.
Wow. Yes, yeah, that's incredible. I remember you also telling me that the bloke who came in there was quite a big handful, wasn't he? Like a big 6 foot.
I actually knew him. From he used to come on the Reduta trips as a young kid, and I actually knew. I can't remember what his name is, but he came into the office and he got all of his, you know, this big gang of lads behind him, and the Carp Talk office. If you know what Carp Talk office is like, there was only 2 or 3 of us that was, you know, against 9 lads. It's not going to happen.
Wow.
Do you know what I mean? So it ended up being a bit of a I think he broke a computer and stuff like that, and then ended up, you know, I think one of the girls who worked in the back room, she rang the police. They came down, and you know, it all sort of ended up.
Where did you go after that? Did it proceed legally, or did you had to...
No. It didn't go anywhere, mate. No,
right.
Because we just didn't envisage. Carp Talk was always based at 𝗪𝗪𝘀 house, and you know, when that group of people ended up disappearing, there was a lot of threats made towards, you know, the Carp Talk office and the people that was there, that if anything had developed from the photograph, it had gone into the magazine and stuff like that, then you know, it ended up like, all right, lads, just leave it. Let's just forget it, and it ended up dissolving after that, mate.
Wow, incredible.
Carp fishing, mate. That's carp fishing for you. You know.
Yes.
Yeah. Like I say, everything happened at Carp Talk. It was such a great place to work, great environment to work. So many great stories and memories of working there, mate. And I don't think anybody at Carp Talk would say it was a bad place to work. Even through situations like that, it was just a great place to be at the central hub of carp fishing.
Yeah. So what killed it, Si? Was it Facebook, or what led to the demise?
I don't really know, mate, because when Carp Talk ended, the day that it was announced on social media that it was ending, that was the day I found out, because I wasn't involved in the mechanics of the business. I wasn't behind it all. It was the Clifford family, Kev Clifford, his son Mickey, and 𝗪𝗪𝘀. They were the owners of Carp Talk at the time, and they ran all of the, you know, the business side of things. And the day that everybody else found out, I found out 2 or 3 hours before it went on social media that the mag was ending. And as I understand it, it was mostly down to advertising, because advertising from the big companies was at a time when the platforms like Facebook and YouTube and stuff like that, you know, they were putting a lot of the companies, the big companies, were putting a lot of energy into YouTube channels, and they were getting almost an instant reaction to what they were putting out there, so they could measure how much revenue it was costing them to do things, and the returns from magazines wasn't the same kind of instant return, and it was unmeasurable. If they put an advert in Carp Talk, let's say, they couldn't tell how many rods or items that was getting sold, whereas they could if they did a video and linked to tackle shop in it and things like that. You know, just the evolution of the internet, the evolution of how things change, media changes and stuff like that. And, you know, Bev could probably tell you a little bit more because she was more involved with the, you know, the business side of things and what it was. She might give you a different version to what I say, but as I understand it from what Bev was telling me, it was more to do with, you know, that side of it. The company's not advertising and printing costs, reproduction costs, everything like that. It cost a lot of money to put a magazine together. And, you know, those days were changing at the time, and now everything's obviously online. And that's why I say fair play. And I saw you put that thing out the other day about Carpology and Joe Wright. Absolute doff of the cap to Joe to still be around 8 years after Carp Talk ended. And he was the one that they all said it wouldn't last, and he's still there now doing it. So massive, massive respect to Joe. But that guy, Joe, and it's just to talk quickly about Joe. I know Joe from when he first came to work at Carp World as a T-boy. That's where he first worked as an office junior. We talked earlier on about enthusiasm for certain things, catching fish, marathon running, or whatever, whatever our interests are. Joe's passion and interest in producing magazines is why he's still there. He's got every month when he does a magazine. You probably had the same. When Joe took over Total Carp only a few months ago, we then started getting a massive load of emails of, can you answer this? Can you do that? As he's putting together new little snippets in the magazine. That's Joe. Absolute brilliant editor. And I'm so pleased that his passion is still there now, because if the magazines weren't there, I think Joe would lose his way probably, because he needs something like that to stay focused on.
I couldn't agree more, and I'm glad you mentioned it. Joe's actually, he might follow this, but I'm doing a podcast with him because I think that the world needs more Joe Wright. He's been a tour de force on Carpology with he gets up at 4:00 every morning, and he's just on it. And he's also, and there's not many people you could say this about, he's one of the most benign people you could ever meet. He never talks bad of other people. He's passionate, enthusiastic about getting the job done, and creating true art is what he wants to do, obviously, but that's stifled by the costs and the overheads and everything that goes with it. But he's still fighting against it, and he's the last magazine standing, really. I know Total Carp is still going, but
and the one thing he doesn't do as well, mate, and you'll agree with this, you never see Joe Wright's face anywhere. He never puts himself on a cover, never writes that an article with him being the focus. It's not me, which is what a lot of people are like in the fishing industry. It is Joe behind the scenes putting a magazine together. And he's caught some carp, Joe has. He's been around carp fishing a long, long time, and his influence on carp fishing is absolutely huge. It really, really is. And he deserves massive, massive praise for what he has done. If Carpology ends now, or Total Carp ends now, which is not going to, but if it did, Joe has had a huge influence on carp fishing.
Absolutely. Yeah, brilliant. I couldn't agree more. I'm looking forward to having a chat with him and bringing him to the public a little bit more so they can, see the man behind it. Because as you said, like most people wouldn't ever, if he walked past them in Tesco's or a petrol station, they wouldn't know how pivotal a figure he's been. So I wanted to diversify a little bit, Si, onto the technical side of things, because I might be right in saying that we sitting here together now, you and I, are the only people that have still never tied a Ronnie rig. Am I right in saying that?
I ain't got a clue, mate. I ain't got a clue in any of it. Like I said before, I'm still using the same rigs that I used in the World Carp Cup in 1996, and I've never caught a carp on a chod rig. I don't deny their effectiveness. They are absolutely amazing rigs. They're absolutely, born by forward-thinking carp anglers. It's just that my carp, as I've evolved as a carp angler, I've kind of realised that confidence is the most important thing about fishing, but you can't sell confidence. And experience, watercraft, understanding carp, understanding how lakes work, these are the things that are more important about catching fish. But people want a shortcut to success because they're at work all week, They're looking for fishing is the weekend. They want to grab the latest thing that they think's going to give them an edge to catching fish. And, you know, you can't sell confidence. But, you know, these fashions and things like that to do with rigs are very obvious to someone like myself, and probably yourself as well, who's been around an awful long time. You see the wheel being reinvented every few years. And, you know, Rod always turned around to me, Rod Hutchinson turned around to me and he said, Crow, carp fishing only became difficult when the industry got involved. You know, before that, it was just simple stuff. And he's so right, you know, he's so right. When I was a kid growing up, it was all about the bent hook, you know, and the hair rig, and I was like, wow, what's this new rig, and how'd you tie that, how'd you do that? But then you start to go through that after a few years, and you start to see light at the end of the tunnel. That, you know, you walk into a tackle shop, your head's all over the place. What shall I buy? I need that, need the other. And then you get to the desk and the guy says, oh, have you got that as well? Oh, I need that as well. And you get that as well. And it's a confusion. But when you've experienced, it's not a confusion. It's just a game between you and the fish, and you've got to stay in tune with that fish to catch it, rather than stay in tune with the latest rigs.
So the confusion element is definitely, when I go out with anglers, one of the key things that you see is certainly that, but it's not just, it manifests itself in technical terms, but also they'll have these great big buckets with 50 different types of hook bait, pop-ups in them, right? So once you throw in all that massive confusion with what sort of bait to attach it, along with all the things you just described, those two things are holding so many anglers back from that moment of clarity, or that you're really in a flow state as an angler now, because you know what you need to do, you know what works, it's ultimately transferable. I know you did mention, I read somewhere, that with the braided hook links that you favour, there was some crossover with feedback from Rob with the underwater stuff and stuff that you learned. Could you want to tell us a bit about that side?
Yeah, that was to do with the tangle side of things, mate, when you're tangling. And, you know, I went out and did again for Carpology, one of these underwater dives where you cast out and then the diver goes down, takes photographs and shows you rig and things like that. And there was a bit of between myself and Rob at the time, there was a bit of, I don't know, debate about, that's between two mates, about what he was wanting to achieve from it. And Rob had done an awful lot of underwater tests where he knew that if you just drilled the cast in with the braided hook link, it was going to tangle. But what he needed was a guinea pig to show that. And he used me. And I had no idea what was going to happen. But as a result of doing that test with Rob, I did start to take on board exactly what he was telling me, which is that if you drill a rig in, just cast it and do not stop it, do not hit the clip, do not feather it. The hook link has a chance of tangling around, spiraling around the main line, hitting the deck and being completely unpresentable. But if you feather it, you hit the clip, you fill the lead down, you use a PVA bag, you use a solid bag, you use a stringer or something like that, the hook link has a much better chance of sitting perfectly. And since I did those dive tests with Rob, I took on board his advice, and he's absolutely right. But, have I noticed a difference in my catch rate? Probably not, if I'm honest, which again, I think shows how, I don't want to say this, that carp are easy to catch. It shows probably how unriggy some carp can be. If something's got a hook attached to it, they'll still keep sucking at it, they'll still keep going for it, they'll still keep having a go, even if it is slightly tangled, because I haven't noticed a great deal of difference in my catches, but I am more confident now that I'm going to be fishing much more effectively and in a much better way.
So ostensibly you're using a lead clip or an inline. What's your favourite sort of setup?
Lead clip's my favourite, mate. Lead clip is my favourite. Fishing completely naked, and then just have a braided hook link, which can be anything from, I've fished them as short as, like 5 or 6 inches, something like that, right the way through to long, as we used to call them, confidence rigs. And I'll then just have a knotless knot on the end of it, and then a little bit of silicone tubing to create a liner, and then 99% of the time it will be a bottom bait straight out of the bag. But I do use wafters quite a lot, and I do use, I say 99%. Then I do use wafters a bit, and I do also use pop-ups as well. But it depends on the situation that I'm presented with. I'm one of these people that likes to keep things simple, because when you watch a lot of these underwater videos, you see people baiting up with free offerings that sit on the bottom, and they then fish a completely different hook bait over the top. And I'm not saying that that doesn't work. It's just that what's the point of putting those free offerings out there and then fishing a different hook bait? You know, I was brought up with Dave Chilton's way of marketing Christon hook links, which was that you want to try and camouflage your hook bait as much as possible and trick the carp into thinking it's safe, and then away you go. And that's how I've just carried on fishing, mate, is with 99% of the time, a bottom bait straight out of the bag, trick the carp into thinking it's safe.
Brilliant.
Story.
So just going back to, you mentioned the liner site. Are you doing the actual Jim Gibbonson one, threading it through like as the original liner was intended, or are you using just an extension?
For many years, mate, after the bent hook rig and Jim brought out the liner, I just used Jim's way with, the needle, pushing it through the side. A lot of my early articles in magazines was exactly the same as how Jim did it. And I've progressed, though, since then to using these actually manufactured liners where the hook link comes out the top, and that works whereby you are presented with, as you know, mate, the old bent hook rig style of presentation, like a slightly long shank hook with a bend in it, and that will turn and twist. And I still do it to this day, mate, and I still use it all the time.
Well, I think that there's never been a more effective time on busy waters to be a bottom bait angler, because of the way the whole the trends and the fashions have been with Ronnies and stiff hinges and so on. And I think an actual bottom bait in itself is the best rig you can use. is what I say.
It's a free offering, mate, isn't it? You go to the extent of catapulting, firing out all those baits, and then fishing something different over the top. And I don't watch those underwater videos because I'm at a stage in my carp fishing nowadays where, I just like to go fishing. I don't get so much involved in a lot of the media nowadays. And I did watch the Fox one from 2 years ago, I think it was, on Hallcott Lake. So I watched it from start to finish. There's 4 hours of it, and I got engrossed in it. But I also got a little bit frustrated with it because all I could see was these fish going down on the free offerings and leaving the hook bait. But nobody decided to put an actual match the hatch hook bait out there. It was all completely different stuff. And I'm like, I keep saying this. Why are you? It's just carp fishing. Everybody's got their ways of fishing nowadays. And I'm not saying that mine's the best way. I will get cleaned out just the same as other anglers do. I'll get done. There'll be times on a lake when I'm not catching anything and everybody else is catching stuff. It's more to do with processing it in your mind more than anything, and that's how I go with my fishing. Is just today's today, and tomorrow's a different day.
Yeah, absolutely. So the rig that you came up with, as you said, in the 90s, what did you and Rob call it for your day ticket series?
We called it the Uni rig, universal rig. Right. Yeah, universal rig.
So because you, and that's pretty much the same process and the same rig that you're applying now. You want one thing that will pretty much do everything that you want it to do, and I imagine that you're mostly a boilie angler.
Mostly boilie angler, mate.
So have there been times where you've been on a campaign or something and you've had to completely remix that and go in with hemp or something? I mean, or has that worked for you everywhere?
You have to be a versatile. You know these penners. I'm not telling you how to catch carp. You have to be a versatile carp angler. You have to be willing to change things and look for different edges and things like that. It all depends what you're trying to achieve, with fishing. When I was a young guy, I suppose, getting into the industry, it was all about getting bites and catching more than everybody else, the match side of things. As I've got older, I'm not like that at all. I'm more interested in catching just that one carp, a bit like Terry is, that target fish. I want that one bite. Nobody remembers the top rod at the end of the year. They all remember the bloke that's had the big one. And I like to target those big fish. So my fishing sort of focuses on that style of fishing more than anything, and predominantly it is using boilies, because big fish, as I've got older in my fishing, big fish just love boilies. If you want more bites, then use something bright yellow and, you know, small tiny little bit fishing and things like that. Whereas if you want the bigger carp, then you've got to go down a different avenue. And the rig that we've developed, myself and Rob, even though he doesn't use it anymore himself nowadays, you know, he was involved with it. It's aimed at just having confidence, and I've used it at that many venues now. I can't remember how many lakes I've caught with that rig, but it's into the hundreds, several hundreds of different lakes, and I think that's a good test of a rig, whether it's universal or not. I've got masses of confidence in it. I'm going fishing again tomorrow. I got back yesterday from fishing, and it's still catching me carp today wherever I go. And that's down to my confidence more than anything, mate. But I'm not saying I don't get cleaned out. I'm not saying I don't get done. I'm not saying that the latest Super Fandango rig's not going to outfish it. But I've been down that spiral where I've got to try this, got to try that. Then you get a hook pull. Then your confidence has gone again. Then you try another rig and your confidence has gone with that because you've not had a bite and the bloke over there's caught more than you. But I've gone back to this rig so many times that I don't care if the bloke over there's having it away on the latest rig. I'm happy with what I'm doing and I'm sitting on it.
Well, that takes a certain kind of maturity and a lot of confidence, and it's the perfect time to come on to your actual fishing, because you said actually a little search on the internet will give a figure of 400 plus venues that you've caught carp from. So you understated that a little bit. It was a couple of hundred.
Yeah.
And you've had 50s from 7 countries, 50 pounds from 7 countries, which
I think it's a few more than that now, mate, because I've kind of, it's a few more than that. There was a time when me and 𝗲𝗲 used to go overseas fishing together, and we started, well, I've had them from 7 countries, I've had them from 8, and, you know, and then Steve's just gone and carried on with the overseas fishing. But Steve's not had kids like I have. I've had kids in my life, been divorced, and you have your kids. It stops you traveling around, and you focus on your kids, bringing the kids up and your family life and things like that. And I've kind of lost interest in doing a bit of that sort of international fishing that Steve really massively enjoys. I still do it now because I'm at a different stage of my fishing career whereby my kids are grown up and I can pick and choose where I want to go. And I love the overseas style of fishing. But, you know, I've had decent fish from a lot of different places, mate, which, you know, I don't really kind of keep in touch with things now.
Well, I mean, I've seen you with massive German commons. I've seen you had, was it called Eric's, the 86-pounder from
Rainbow. Yeah, the biggest carpet rainbow at the time. Yeah.
Put a picture up of that. I mean, it's absolutely amazing. Like what you've, and honestly, one of the really, it was just what I would call a high gravity image, and it just stopped me in my tracks. Was you with that 70 from Orellana recently?
𝗖𝗿, yeah. Right, mate. It's my, it's you know, like carp fishing. It's not about carp fishing's about yourself and what you want from your fishing. And I've always, as a kid growing up, I always got influenced by those Cassian monsters and fishing on those kind of waters, because they are, in my mind, the pinnacle of carp fishing, because you need not just the best gear, not just good baits and things like that. You need a completely different frame of mind to be on those waters when the weather turns, and the ruggedness of fishing them and hunting down big fish in thousands of acres. And it's different to fishing a 1 acre pit or a small English lake. It's the pinnacle of all types of carp fishing, because I've done river fishing, canal fishing, boat fishing, small pond, day ticket fishing, all that kind of stuff, everything. And I've always viewed those absolute giants from the big waters, the wild waters of the continent, as being really special. And 𝗖𝗿 is one of the wildest lakes I've ever fished. It's known as the Devil's Lake because of the weather patterns in that particular valley, where it can switch in an instant. And having been there during those awful storms, if you go on the internet, you see some of the storms that the lake has on there, some of the German videos. It's just absolutely wild to go there and catch a fish like that. I'm never ever going to top it in my fishing career. You know, never. Even if I caught Mary now, it wouldn't top me. It wouldn't top that. If I caught Heather now, it wouldn't top that to me. Everybody's got different things that they look at, and you know that's my personal favourite carp because it was the unachievable carp, and then I went and caught it. And I said recently on the Fox podcast, the day I left that lake, I didn't publicise anything whilst I was there. I never wrote anything on any social media. I am currently fishing this swim and blah, 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 because you just don't do that when you're fishing that kind of lake, and you're just going to ruin it for yourself. When I'd got the car loaded up and I'd been on the lake and pulled off, I was driving home, got a long drive home, and certain tunes come on the radio, or on my music. The buzz that I got from leaving that lake was just unbelievable. If I could lock that up and inject it into myself every day, I'll be a proper big fish junkie, mate. I really would. It was just awesome.
Well, it's an astonishing looking fish, mate, and I can feel it just coming through the screen, the energy that's giving you, that just to achieve something which, you know, you've got a lot of angling years ahead of you and you think you'll never top it. So that's quite a statement. That's remarkable.
Yeah, you fished the big lakes, mate. I know you've been to Cassian and places like that. I don't know what the weather's been like when you've been there. I don't know how many times you've been here. I know you've caught good fish from Cassian, 50-pounders, and you know had some good fish from there. And you know, you might not personally enjoy them. You might not have had the same sort of angling experience on that lake as I have. Everybody's got personal favourites and personal memories and things like that. So you know, everybody's different. But for me, I can't top that fish.
That's Cassian is an interesting one. It's somewhere I'm desperate to go back to, and I never had any bad weather there, but we were fishing it days only, and caught some nice fish, and I'd love to go back. But I think in terms of Salagoo, you know, that is, and I've spoken to Joe, who's been at Joe Morgan, went out there, and it sounds like the ultimate in terms of what you've got to overcome, the wildness and how the attrition and the ravages of just being there. So, and the carp looked, I mean, the look of that 70-pounder that you caught, it was very inspirational side. Like I've seen a lot of your fish, mate. But that one stopped me in my tracks almost as much as another fish, which I'm going to come, well, let's go to it now actually, because again, like looking at your fish over the years, there's lots of standout moments, but one that really just stuck in my mind, I remember reading the write-up you did in Carp Talk at the time, was a fish from, I think, from 𝗪𝗏𝗃𝗀𝗃, and I think it was 43 pound. An amazing looking fish. The shape of that carp was up there with any of them for my money. Now, tell us a bit about that. Am I right in saying that that's one of your most significant and cherished captures?
Yeah, definitely, mate. Yeah, definitely. Because I'm from down in the Midlands, mate, and I moved up north. I've got a Yorkshire family, and when I moved up to Yorkshire, there was two fish to catch. There was the motorway pond big un, and there was the Nostell Priory big un. And the Nostell Priory one was always the one that was the harder one to catch because there's never been night fishing on there. And to go to that lake and fish it and see what it's like, it was a 20-acre lake. That's a 20-acre lake, I should say. And it's got, at the time, it had about 15 carp in it. And you were allowed on the lake, first light, sort of 8 o'clock in the morning, 7 o'clock in the morning, right the way through to last light. And obviously, I lived at the time about 50 miles away from that lake, and to keep driving backwards and forwards from a house to that lake to try and target a fish like that, a special one like that, was not an easy task whatsoever. And I've got a great memory of fishing it because at the time it had gone missing for a couple of years, it had not been caught. It was the days when there was the forums rather than the Facebook pages, and everyone was going on there, the Northern Carp Fishing Forum. Why is Crowie still fishing for that fish? Everybody knows it's not there anymore, but I'd seen it and I knew it was there. And that tunnel vision of never giving up, that's what I'm like, mate. I'll never give up. And if you knock me down, I'll keep getting up and I'll just keep going. And I did. And eventually I got that one, and it meant the absolute world to me. And I always talk to my missus now in carp fishing terms, because she always remembers it, because I say, you're my 𝗪𝗡𝘀𝘀. You know, you're my big one from 𝗪𝗡𝘀𝘀. You know, she's now my 𝗖𝗿𝗍. Do you know what I mean? She's my 𝗖𝗿𝗍 fish because they mean so much to you. And then, you know, your partner, it's hard to explain to your partner that they're the same as a carp, but my wife gets it. And quite a few times since I've caught that fish, because we live in Yorkshire, we'll go and have a walk around 𝗪𝗡𝘀𝘀 just to relive it. And this is the swim. I know it's the swim, and I know what happened and all that sort of stuff. It's not a monster carp by British carp standards, and there is no comparison to the Black Mirror whatsoever. The Black Mirror is an incredible English iconic carp. But if you could, at the time, look at a carp in Yorkshire for being of the similar stature to the local anglers, it was that fish. It was the 𝗪𝗡𝘀𝘀𝘀 fish. And so when I caught it, it meant the world to me, mate, and it still does to this day.
I love that, Si. Am I right in saying that at that time when you were pursuing that fish, you were going to the lake at 4 a.m. so you could fish before work? Was that
Yeah, that's right, mate. I'd kind of, you know, going back to that bit to do with me doing fisheries and wanting to know about carp and understanding fish and understanding lakes and things like that. I've got a kind of different way of approaching lakes. You know, a lot of guys go on a lake wanting to know about what's the latest, what's the best reed to use, what's the best bait to use and stuff like that. And don't get me wrong, they are important. They're very important. They're things that I'll always look at and I'll always consider. But I'm very anal about looking at the carp that I want to catch and trying to understand that carp. What time of the day does it get caught generally? What time of the year does it get caught generally? When's the peak time to catch that fish? Because if you can look at all the catch reports and the catch data, and this goes back to my days at Carp Talk, you can actually pattern spot, which will help you try and target a particular fish, because carp fishing is about odds. It's about odds. Being the right conditions, the right day, the right weather, the right rig, the right bait, the right spot, all this kind of stuff. And if you can reduce the odds by finding a pattern of a fish and finding a time when it generally gets caught, with nostal, what I'd seen is that particular big, and it didn't always get caught at that time. This is the one thing that people are missing. It's not about always. It's when does it generally get caught? And it generally got caught in the morning. And so I was more focused with my fishing on that lake to go in there in the morning and then packing up and then going to the office, doing a bit of work, driving another 50 miles back to the lake, walking round it, looking for the fish, ready for the next session the next day, and then repeating the process. And over the years, it was a couple of years of targeting that fish. I clocked up untold amounts of mileage and footwork and leg work to track that fish. So you can imagine the feeling that I got from that, Penners, because you've done it yourself with some of your target carp and some of the things that you've achieved in your fishing. Some fish stand out to you more, and that one, when it comes to me English captures, it's my biggest English carp is 64 pounds from a 70-acre pit in Nottinghamshire, but it doesn't compare to the nostal fish. It's the nostal fish means more to me because I put more time, effort. It's harder to catch. It's more kudos for the area, and it was a proper carp. And I tell you what, mate, is another reason. Terry doesn't message me very often, even though I've got a decent relationship with him, and when we see each other at shows and things like that. Of all the carp I've caught in my life, it's the only one that Terry's messaged me and gone, frigging hell, that's a special carp, Crowy.
No,
and I've still got a screenshot of that.
Yeah,
so, you know, and I think when I wrote a book a few years ago, in 2015, I actually wrote that in there. And there you go, it's got Terry's stamp of approval because he don't fish for wrong uns.
No, it was a magnificent carp, Si, and I love the story about that, and it stayed in my mind also because, you know, a lot of people are quick to make excuses. I haven't got enough time is usually the one. If I had more time, and you know, for you didn't have loads of time. You had a job, but you would go to the lake at 4 a.m. and fish till 8 a.m. or whenever, just to get that window. And it's all about what you're prepared to do. And I very much, you know, when you're talking about your angling at 𝗖𝗿𝗍 or hearing this nostal thing, I'm seeing the marathon runner. I'm seeing that tough mentality that you've obviously got in abundance, which is remarkable. It's very inspiring.
It's easy to turn around and knock people, and I see this on the internet, mate. When you see these stuff when they're talking about Terry, yourself, or anybody that works in the industry or goes fishing for carp and is successful at it. Oh, it's all right for him. He's a full-time carp angler. It's all right for him. He fishes more than I do. He ain't got a 9 to 5. He ain't got kids and family and all this sort of stuff. When I was a kid growing up, from our school, the most successful person was a lad called 𝗵𝗍𝗵𝘀, and he was a golfer. And he ended up being in the Ryder Cup team. He ended up being in the he won the Benson and Hedges a few times. He's a name from the 90s. Peter, when we used to be at school, he's 4 years above me. He doesn't know me. I don't know him, but I knew him because he was 𝗵𝗍𝗵𝘀, and everybody used to talk about him. He was always on the back page of the newspapers and stuff like that. And I've got memories of being on the school playing fields when we were all arsing around doing nothing. He was down there in the sandpit where everybody would do the long jump and things like that, and he was just chipping away, ball after ball after ball, basket of balls, one after another. And what's that knob doing? No, fuck you, and all that. You knobbing, you golf, And we were all arsing around doing things. He had tunnel vision to be the person that he is. And you see it now with a Ronnie O'Sullivan, potting one after another. You ain't born heavyweight champion of the world. Oh, today I'll get up and be heavyweight champion of the world. No, you got to go and train. You got to do the things. You got to go and run if you're a marathon runner. If you're a carp angler, they can knock 𝗍𝗍𝗃 as much as they frigging want. He ain't married. He's a single bloke. Just goes. Yeah, but that's why he's 𝗍𝗍𝗃. Because he just goes out catching carp. He's the most successful, passionate carp angler around. And there's lots of spring-offs of that. There's lots of other guys that have been mega successful. Yourself, loads of guys in the trade that have got that tunnel vision to catch carp. They will go to great lengths to catch carp. And, they're a different breed, mate. The guys that want to play with carp fishing will catch carp. They'll catch big carp. They'll have their days. They'll have their moments. But they won't be the same as those guys that are completely obsessed and passionate about it.
It's funny, actually, that obsession and passion can take you, or that ability to have the endurance can take you over the finishing line ahead of having a greater skill set sometimes. And you won't mind me saying, like, my best mate, Mark Cole, is the best angler I've ever fished with. He actually fished with Terry in a BCAC at Linear once, and they both absolutely smashed their qualifier. And Mark is a phenomenal angler, but when it comes to having to grit your teeth and go through a barrier or something, he'd think like, I'll go and do something else now. He's got abundance of ability, and I think sometimes having a lower ability, which I've got compared to him, certainly, but having that stubborn mentality, which you've got in abundance, will get you over the finishing line ahead of loads of skill set sometimes, won't it?
Absolutely, mate. Yeah. You did right, Penners. I ain't the best carp angler in the world. I ain't claiming to be. I'm not anybody. I'm just a person that's passionate about it and absolutely love it. And I am somebody that will keep going, and eventually I'll probably get the ones that I want. Not always, but I'll keep going until I can.
I mentioned you in a podcast recently. We were talking about fish that I was talking about some fish that I'd seen caught. And sometimes when there's a fish caught, I think, oh, well, if I had a ticket for there, would I have been able to catch that in similar circumstances? And sometimes the answer is yes, and usually the answer is no. But there was one particular fish that you caught, and the answer was a resounding no. I would not have been able to do that. And it was a fish that you referred to just now, which was the Gurton fish. Now, am I right in saying that you deliberately didn't fish where the other, to give the guys a bit of a background, there's lots of smaller carp and one really big one. Is that about right?
Yeah, that's right, mate. Yeah. At the time I was a member of there, you've got a day ticket lake, which is next door to it. Gurton is 70 acres in size. The main lake is 70 acres, 70. So it's a big piece of water. Next door to it is a 10-acre lake, which is run as a day ticket fishery. It's right near the River Trent, and the Trent comes up and down all the time. And in the early years of the lake, it flooded. All of the day ticket fish went into the main lake. So when I was a member of there, it's since been changed. It's since been fenced, so it doesn't happen anymore. But when I was a member of the main lake, there was a lot of carp in there, a lot of bites to be had if you set up on where the fish were. But the big one that's in there, which is an awful name, called 𝗤𝗏 it had a track history. Again, it's just understanding this fish. It had a track history of getting caught on its own. You'd never catch it in a multiple catch. I think one guy did when they were getting ready to spawn. He caught it in a multiple session, but most of the time it was one catch out the blue, away from where the most of the stockfish are. And this particular fish, it had a habit of being away from where the shoalfish were, and I wanted to catch it. That's why I was a member of that lake, is just to catch that. I didn't want to be the top rod. That's a phase that I did in the early days of fishing. I wanted to target that fish, and very often people would be pulling off. They'd be driving past me. Any good Crowie? No, not caught a thing. How about yourself? I've had 4 in a day session today to 35 pounds down at the bottom end. And well done, mate. Keep going. And I'd often have these people, which I don't know this, but I got this sense that they were like, why are you sitting there trying to catch that fish when you can go and catch a load of fish down the other end? Because we've got different goals in our fishing, and mine was to catch that fish, and eventually I did catch it. And that's what I'd set my mind on, and that's how I am now. That's where I'm at with my fishing. Is if I want to achieve a certain thing, I'm willing to sacrifice bites. I'm willing to sit there and do what I want to achieve, and try and achieve it in a way where I don't care what people think about what I'm doing. I don't care what people think about me as an angler. If they're out fishing me, I'm not bothered. If I've got a target fish, then that's the one thing that I'm trying to achieve.
That takes a lot of resilience when you got people driving past you saying they're caught, and you can imagine what's going through their heads. But you kept that tunnel vision and caught a 64-pound British common carp, which is, and I love the picture of the water shot of that, is remarkable. And it does deserve a better name because it looks like an incredible fish to me.
Terrible name, mate. But it's just how carp anglers are, isn't it? In names of fish.
But you must have had, there must be a little bit more to that. You wouldn't have just been sitting there fishing blind. Did you see it in an area? Did you fish an area that it had form for? I mean, it's 70 acres, Si.
Yeah.
So what was going through you?
He'd had a track record of getting caught in the central part of the lake, which is not the most productive part of the lake. It's kind of a passing place because it's like a long, thin lake, 𝗪𝗛𝗍, and the bottom part of it's got a big bowl. The bowl was where the majority of the stock used to sit, and there's areas around there where you could fish and you could get 3 or 4 bites every few hours because there was so many carp down there. That middle part, as they passed through it, that's, they did migrate from one end to the other, but that area was where that fish, it was never, at the time I caught it, it had never been caught twice from the same swim, but it had been caught from that area a few times in different swims. It was deep, it was featureless, it was barren, it was just the perfect place for a lone carp to be. And on one occasion that I'd seen 𝗤𝗏 before I caught it, I saw it on its own. It was so huge, it could be no other carp that was in the lake. It was definitely that fish. I was up a tree and I saw it, and it came in really close, and I was like, wow, and he was on his own. So I knew he was a loner, and it just struck me as the area that kind of fish would sit and enjoy its time away from the other fish, because at the end of the day, carp, they're just like all species. Well, I say all species. They're just like the majority of things. They're all different, as they've got their own personalities. No dog is the same, no cat is the same, no human is the same. We're all different. We've all got our own personalities. And the more that you watch carp and study carp, you'll see that some of them are aggressive, some of them are loners, some of them are social fish, some of them live a completely different life to the majority. So to target a carp in a majority sense of the way is you're targeting just catching fish rather than targeting that personality and that carp. And that particular fish is a carp that it was difficult to target, but you could, because it lived a completely different life to the other, or it does live a completely different life to the other fish that's in there. And that's about understanding the fish and getting to know the fish. And that's something that I picked up off Rod. It was Rod Hutchinson, spending time with Rod, who you know, I only got to know Rod in his latter years, really. But he was such a pioneer of carp fishing, and they all said, a lot of the older guys, the older generation, that Rod is an amazing angler. And the first time I watched Rod fish, he wasn't an amazing angler. He was in his latter years, and I was kind of, you know, is this really Rod Hutchinson? But then when you sat down and chatted to him, his brain was still Rod Hutchinson. It was an incredible brain and an incredible knowledge of carp fishing and carp and understanding carp. And I liked what Rod presented me with. And with the greatest respect to Tim Paisley is probably one of my favourites ever men that I've ever met in my life. He's been massively influential in my fishing career. He's somebody that I absolutely adore and admire. But Tim's outlook on carp is not the same as mine. I think he looks at things in a very complex way, and he's a very super intelligent man. Tim is. He could build a rocket that would go at the moon, and I've never been able to kind of relate with Tim's understanding of carp, but I have Rod's, and Rod's understanding of carp was like, yeah, I think exactly the same way as you, Rod. I'm picking up from what you're saying here, is that carp are like that, and I want to know about carp. I want to understand carp. And the carp that some people talk about, I can't relate with, but with Rod, I picked up that knowledge from it and how to understand it, how to target them, and how to sort of pursue your fishing by looking at the carp and understanding them, and that stayed with me. And even to this day, I'm still a very simple person when it comes to fishing. Is that so long as I'm understanding the carp, the noise around me, I'm not bothered with.
That must have taken is that where you've arrived at now, or have you always been pretty much like that?
I feel as though I've always been like that,
right.
But it needed to come out of me by Rod. It needed Rod to install that, you know, that into me, because I've spent an awful lot of time around those early pioneers of carp fishing, and all of those guys are different in many ways. I could build, when someone turns around to you and says, you know, who's the greatest carp angler you've ever met? Well, I can't really say, but I can build the greatest carp angler by taking a bit from Tim Paisley, a bit from Kevin Clifford, a bit from Rod Hutchinson, a bit from Kevin Nash, a bit from yourself, a bit from Steve Briggs, a bit from Terry Earn, a bit from 𝗖𝗿𝗽, all these kind of carp anglers. I could create the best carp angler out there, without a doubt. And Tim's enthusiasm and drive and just leadership of how he is as an individual is an amazing trait. But Rod's understanding of carp was something that I was like, well, yeah, I get that, I understand it, and I'm sticking with what you're saying. And that's why I don't complicate anything. I'm not into these salesmen that this, you need to do this, you need to do that. What happens is the carp spins round, you know. And I'm like, no. I am stepping back. Carp are carp, and I understand carp. And I don't profess to understand them better than anybody else. All I'm saying is that my focus on my fishing is about the carp, not the rig, not the bait, not the gear, the carp.
And that was very much how 𝗪𝗍 was, as you just alluded to. You took that from him. And 𝗪𝗍, I always think of, like, I've got all of his books and an original of the greatest carp book ever written. But I would say that I always looked at 𝗪𝗍 and Maddox as being like, I was more of a 𝗪𝗍 man, because 𝗪𝗍, particularly in the Carp Strikes Back, he had fun with a capital F, didn't he? Stories where, and Maddox was brilliant, and he was inspirational to me in a different kind of way. And I worked for Kevin Maddox for a period of time, and Kevin was very methodical and technical, and it always seemed to me that Maddox was like Van Lendl and Rod was Borg. He was
definitely. Yeah. They're tennis players, by the way, if people don't know who they are. The younger guys. That's a great summary of them, mate, because Rod definitely was like a Beyond Borg. Real. He actually made me realise as well, Rod did. Spending time around Rod made me realise that there's more to carp fishing than just catching fish. You know, and one of his books got Smell of Roses along the way, and it's dead right, mate. You got to understand it in a different way and get out of carp fishing what it is. And as I've matured as an angler, that's how I am now, mate. Is at that stage. Fishing it means so many more things than just catching fish.
Yeah. Do you think it's a bit of a shame? Well, I'm sure you do, or do you agree that it's a bit of a shame that now a lot of the fun, if you think of a book like Carp Strikes Back or Tiger Bay or Fox, Rob Malin's writings, he didn't give an F about anything. And, there would be a page about farting competitions and, and all of that.
Yeah.
And I just, when I look back, I just think it's, nowadays, a lot of carp anglers just take themselves too seriously. Like they walk around because they caught a few big carp, they walk around like they found a cure for cancer. And when you look back, 𝗪𝗍 was never like that, and Rob was never like that. And is that a social media thing that's caused that, or it saddens me anyway? What's your view on it?
Yeah. I reckon so, mate. It could be. Social media is something I don't understand. I don't get it. Don't get a lot of it. If you want to be famous at anything nowadays, motor racing, you just get a few helmets, take a few photographs of those, a few selfies with the drivers, and and you can build a following, especially if you're a handsome or gorgeous looking girl or a handsome looking bloke or whatever. The more youthful you are, the more followers you're going to get and things like that. It is. And I'm not knocking anybody for being that way inclined. We're in it for different reasons. But what I do say is a lot is our generation, the people I'm talking about here, Penners, our generation of carp anglers are in it for the right reasons. And when people turn around to me and say, how do I get a job like yours, Crowy? You get it through not being the best carp angler, not through having loads of followers on Instagram or social media or anything like that. You get it because you absolutely love carp fishing. You are in love with it. And you can't do without it. And that's why a company, a brand will get involved with you. Yes, it helps having a social media presence. Yes, it helps having an influencer presence. But you ain't going to keep on doing it year after year after year after year if you don't love it. You've got to love it. You've got to not love the attention. You've got to love going fishing and going in all weathers, winter, spring, every single day of the year. You've got to be thinking about going carp fishing. And that's how you get that job. And that's where you see people like Tom Maker coming into it. I remember Tom when he was a young kid. I ran the Young Carp Championships at the Linear for 13 years. Tom, when he was a kid getting into it, he had the same passion for fishing. And he's now evolved into this brand. He's involved into this ambassador. And he's the youth coming through. And there are people like Tom that's got the same, young guys that's got that same enthusiasm. So to say it's just a generation thing, it isn't. But that love for fishing is what has got me a job in it. It's got you a job in it. It's got a 𝗍𝗲, a Steve Briggs, a Kevin Nash, a Danny Fairbrass, a Tom Maker, and the rest of the guys. That's what's got them that job, is that love and absolute association with carp fishing.
I think that there's very wise words there for people looking to come into it. And you probably get people approach you maybe saying, how do I get known or get noticed? And I mean, I think probably from what you've told me and from what I know, it just happened. You didn't actively seek to become a super famous, very accomplished carp angler. You just did it because you loved it. And is that correct?
That's dead right, mate. I had no idea what I wanted to do when I left school. No idea at all. Tried to get in the army. Failed, even as fit as I am. I failed the listening test. Failed the medical, because one of my ears was blocked up, and that's why I didn't get in the army. I didn't know where I was going. I had no idea what I was going to do. There was no jobs to do with fishing apart from maybe going down the local tackle shop and riddling the maggots and things like that. All I ever wanted to do in my life was get through it in the most enjoyable way. I don't like doing things that I'm not interested in. I've had jobs that I've hated, but I found myself always being drawn towards doing the things that I enjoy. And it doesn't matter about money. Money doesn't motivate me. Money, it does, you need it. Of course you do. But what I've always wanted to do is do what I enjoy. I'm selfish. I like going fishing. I just want to go fishing all the time. And I've never had a job of just going fishing. There's been what you do is you find yourself, I want to be involved in fishing, even though there's no money there. I'll go and do this. And I started off volunteering, being involved in so many different things free of charge, just being around fishing, because that's what made me happy. That's what made me, love fishing, is just being out there, and I just wanted to get involved with it. And as the industry's grown, thanks to so many different people and reasons, we've all had our own little way of helping it get to where it is. And as it's grown, things have, doors have opened, and we now got jobs such as what me and you do. They're our jobs. They didn't exist when we was kids, mate, did they? We've got it through being around fishing, and it just becoming our jobs through us loving it. And we're fortunate that the industry is doing well now, that it can pay us a decent, enough, not a decent wage, but enough to keep going. Do you know what I mean?
It's a lot of people think, probably from the outside looking in, that sponsored anglers are wealthy people, but it's a cottage industry, and ultimately, certainly in my experience, the only people who do it really well financially are the people who have their own companies, and they do really well. But for the foot soldiers, it's not, and it proves again that we're in it for the love of it and the passion for it, and for the right reasons. It does pain me a little bit that people like yourself or Terry, aren't being such a big sport as we are, or Dave Lane, that they aren't financially remunerated in a way that is reflective of being pivotal figures in such a big sport. That saddens me a bit, but it's such a backwards industry in that respect. And I think that's largely based on, if you remember, like going back to the 90s, you might have someone who was living with their mum, and they would go to 𝗖𝗿𝗽, they'd sleep under a 45-inch brolly, they'd eat pot noodles every night, they'd catch 3 40s in a year, and then someone would want to sponsor them. And the chance of, so the company would say, well, how about we pay you $1,000 a year? And they'd be like, oh yeah, hallelujah, $1,000 a year. It was, and it's almost like that laid the foundation for paying people nothing in the industry as sponsored anglers. And it will probably never change. Obviously, the heads of the big companies do really well, and a lot of them do really good things for the.
We're still the lowest. We're still the lowest of the low, mate. I have to say this. We're almost like warehouse men, because people will look at you as the representative of a brand, or whoever as a representative of a brand, come to you, message you, and you're supposed to know all these answers and be able to sort of sort things out. But sponsored anglers know absolutely jack shite about most of the launch dates, most of the new products, most of the costings on things, and how much things are going to be, and what the weights are, and things like that. We're the last to know everything, and we're the first to be blamed probably for all of the problems, because that's how, it's not this amazing, it's an amazing job, but it's not what it's perceived to people out there. It's a lot different, and every company I've worked for is exactly the same. You are treated exactly the same. You are the one that gets paid the least. You are the one that gets blamed the most, and the one that most people probably come to and associate with a brand. But that's the same for everybody, no matter what a picture they paint, whoever it is, because there's a few guys in the industry who paint this super, celebrity sort of image and things like that, but it's not quite like that, really. It's we're just carp anglers helping the spoke of the wheel move around.
We are lucky to do what we do, and I know you wrote somewhere not too long ago that I think you were talking about people within your family or extended family who were very successful, but successful in terms of finance, and doing well for themselves, but you considered yourself like the happiest of the bunch, because you might not have as big a bank balance as they've got, but you get paid to do what you love, and you do it day in, day out, and your whole life revolves around it. And that makes you a very rare and lucky person, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely, mate. And, I've never been motivated by money, just not one of those people whatsoever. I am purely motivated by enjoyment, and every day, if I'm enjoying what's coming, then I'm winning as far as I'm concerned. And my sister's a very successful person within her job. She's very stressful. It's very stressed. She'd hate me saying that, but I love her to bits. She's very stressed. She's very high, phones ringing, and oh God, and all that sort of stuff. And I've never really been like that. I've never wanted it, and I don't want it. And more to do with just enjoying every day as it comes, and going fishing is the best way to enjoy everything.
It occurred to me not too long ago that a lot of this reason that people are so driven, it's all about materialism. Because ultimately you're doing a job that probably most people don't want to do, and you're doing it every day to buy more stuff that you don't bloody need. It kind of encapsulates the whole thing. To get a new car, do you need a new car? No. To get a new watch, to get a bigger house, to get, and it seems like that virus of materialistic need is a big part of the problem. And once you realise that actually, I'm all right in this old T-shirt, or my van's 5 years old, I don't care. You sort of, maybe it's getting older, but you ease yourself into a more comfortable place of being. Do you find that, Si?
Yeah, definitely, mate. I'm as I get older now, mate. I'm a loner. I ain't part of that. I don't fit in. I don't. My thoughts on COVID. I don't follow what people tell me to do. Of course, there's rules, there's regulations you've got to follow and things like that, of course, but I don't do things just because somebody told me to do it. And I've never been like that. And I feel uncomfortable being shepherded into doing that and being that part of that. And I am me. I'm the one person in the family that's like that, that's always like that, that'll always be like that, even to the point that I went to a christening only the other day, and everybody's dressed up to the max, and I just turned up, and and everybody's going, typical of you to be the way you are, because you're that, you're the. I'm like, well, no. See what I'm seeing? You're like that. You're doing what everybody else has to do. I'm just that way, mate. I'm me.
I think the world needs more people like you, Si, but then that would take away your uniqueness. So, what's gonna happen next for you? I mean, what are you? Have you got your sights set on big overseas missions again, or are you chasing a UK target, or what we're looking at for the sort of immediate future?
Both, mate. Absolutely both, mate. I just love carp fishing, and every year I've got targets, fishing places in mind, venues that I want to go to. As I've got older, I am seeking things that I've not yet accomplished on my list. There's certain things that I want to get, and certain things that interest me. Saying that, I've still got one or two tickets that's got fishing those busy. They are kind of busy lakes that I still want to catch. I'm still a member of the Foundry, which is a water I've been a member of now for 2 or 3 years, 3 or 4 years actually. And there's fishing there that I want to catch. A couple of real nice target carp in there. And, overseas wise, I've just got a ticket this year for a lake that's a German lake that's got a 94-pounder in it, which is the most breathtaking 94-pounder you could ever imagine. It's like a half linear. And I'd like to have a bit of that. Still got, I went to Texas only the other day because the carp fishing out there is something there's a pioneering spirit out there. There's a possibility to go out there and rewind the clock to the 1990s and catch carp that you don't know about. So that pioneering side of me is still in there. But, at the end of the day, I've still got to catch a few fish as well because of my job, and still be, putting a few films out and things like that. So the job involves lots of different things. And my targets just vary year on year, depending on, what's motivating me, and what's keeping me going.
Okay, so you're with Avid,
yep,
and have been for quite a long time now.
8 years now, mate. Yeah, I've been with Avid for 8 years, and
nice.
DNA Baits for 8 years. I kind of left when Carp Talk ended. I was put in this position where part of my earnings was as a sponsored angler from Nash. I worked for Nash for many years, and the day that Carp Talk ended, actually Nash rang me up and said he offered me a job to go and work for Nash full time as a sponsored carp angler. And then it was like the first stages of the early days of sponsored carp anglers as such having full time jobs. And Nash had not got one, And Kevin wanted to offer me it, but there's obviously a lot of people involved at Nash. He had to run it by different people. And when he came to me with, from what he was originally talking about to what he came to me with, the job had slightly changed a bit over a few days. And then my sister, who I've just been talking about, she actually worked with 𝗖𝗿𝗄𝗻, Jason used to be the brand manager of 𝗖𝗿𝗽. She worked with Jason's wife, and indirectly through Jason's wife and my sister, Jason had approached me, and my sister said, look, there's an offer on the table for 𝗖𝗿𝗽 for you to go and work at 𝗖𝗿𝗽. And it was not only financially better for me to do that, it was also a much better job. And, you know, I turned around to Kevin and I said, look, I've been offered this job, and Alan, and, you know, I don't like leaving any company. I don't like leaving any brand that you've been with for a long time. And, you know, my working relationship with Nash was fantastic. A great bunch of guys, great company to work for, amazing people. But I've still got bills to pay and things like that. And you've got a life to lead. So I got offered this job and it was better. And I've been doing it now ever since, which is 8 years. So,
wow. Mega. Okay. And DNA Bakes, obviously, they've got a fantastic reputation as well. So where can people find you, 𝗖? So what are your main, tell us about your YouTube thing, because we'll put that up on the screen. So tell us about
I've got a couple of my own personal YouTube pages. I am not a video editor. I'm not a videographer. I am not a Carl Smith. Carl Smith went to university to learn how to make films, and he makes the best films you could ever imagine. He is the best videographer that's out there in fishing. He could make a single figured carp film look like a cinematic epic film, and I could go and catch a whacker from wherever and make it look just like a bloke carrying a camera. And that's who I am. I'm a bloke carrying a camera, but I've picked up a few sort of things along the way. I've got a couple of channels. I've got one which is Simon Crow Carp Fishing, which is, it kind of has my session films on it, and then I've started doing more regular films on what's called Simon Crow's Carp Life, which started last year. And that's just so I can put things out there like, well, I've just got a new bed chair. This is the new bed chair, just to help my sponsors and stuff, and just to talk about day-to-day things. And, you know, I've just got back from Texas. There's people out there, maybe only a few, that might want to go and fish in Texas for carp. How can you do it? How can you go about it? I've done a costings on my trip. I've done a breakdown on my trip and showed them how to do it if you want to do it. It won't obviously get as much views as, let's say, a film, how to catch carp in January or February, which sometimes I do put vlogs up saying how to locate carp in February on that channel. But it's got a lot of different things in it. It was aimed to be a weekly upload channel, but I've just ended up not being able to do that, mate. Sometimes I've got interviews on there, and I'm wanting to do an interview with you at some stage next time we meet up, because we've only ever fished together once. And, you know, I know we like discussing different topics and things like that, and I love your sort of free thinking way about stuff, and I'd love to sort of sit down with you and get into your ways of thinking about all sorts of things, and reversing the table of what you've just done now with me, mate, and sitting down and getting to know you as a person, so everybody can see Adam Penning, the angler, because I know there's so much more to you than just what you're doing here now. There's so many carp that you've caught, there's so many things that you've achieved in the fishing industry and done that don't always get talked about, because you're not one of those guys that pushes things out there. And sometimes there's obviously new people coming into the sport that might like to get to know other anglers that are forgotten about. So I sit down with those and chat to those guys in the same way that you're doing with me today.
Brilliant. Well, thank you very much, mate. I would appreciate the kind words there. I would love to get out with you. I'd love to fish with you. I very much feel like you're a bit of a kindred spirit. So yeah, let's do that. And I'd love to do something for your channel. Thanks for asking. Yeah, I'll have a little think about where we could go. That would be a bit of a bucket list thing for me, actually, because it would be nice to talk about all the other stuff that we like to talk about as well as fishing. So
yeah,
brilliant.
Definitely.
Right. Mate, it's been an absolute pleasure. I've kept you here for nearly 2 hours and 10 minutes, so I really appreciate your time. I know time is valuable because you're away during the week and you're home at the weekend. You've got to get the garden done. You've got to keep Lucy happy, and you've got loads of other things to do and so on. So thank you, Simon. It's been a real pleasure and a privilege to have you on, and I'm sure the guys at Carp Academy are going to really enjoy this. So More power to you, mate.
Thank you for having me, mate. Thank you for chatting with me, and it's good to catch up with you because we've known each other a long time now, and we don't have many catch-ups, mate. This is not a proper catch-up because, like I said, I want to reverse the tables and get into the Adam Penning carp angler, and hopefully we shall make that happen at some stage as well. So thanks, guys, for listening to me harp on, and for Pennis for having me on today.
Brilliant. Thanks ever so much, Si. We'll catch up again soon, and keep doing what you're doing, mate. Your passion and enthusiasm is inspirational. Good luck to you.
Cheers, mate. Cheers, Pennis.
Everybody. Goodbye, everybody. Thank you.